There were screams in the void, but no one ever heard them. Not because they weren't loud enough, no. The Vraunak ensured their victims screamed plenty, but because by the time the cry left their lips, the stars had already been silenced. Whole worlds vanished from galactic records, their coordinates corrupted, their histories deleted. It wasn't conquest, it was consumption. The Vraunak moved like fire through dry brush, cold, methodical, terrifyingly precise. They didn't negotiate. They didn't conquer for resources or ideology. They erased civilizations simply to test their own strength, to ensure no one else could ever rival them. The galaxy had long since stopped resisting. Resistance meant annihilation. So when the flame fleets arrived, black and red hulls with plasma lattice veins, biotech tendrils laced with harvested intelligence, most species simply lowered their shields and hoped for a quick death. The Vraunak didn't demand submission. They preferred the quiet of dead planets, but then came the system designated Soul, unknown, unregistered, unaligned. The initial scout drone returned partial data, a G-type main sequence star with a scattering of rocky worlds and a single planet, heavily saturated with carbon-based life and artificial satellites. Oddly fortified, yet quiet. There was no ambassadorial beacon, no plea for mercy. Just a transmission, short, unencrypted, almost too simple to be real. We see you. Come and see us. At first, it amused the high command. The Vraunak loved defiance. It made the breaking of a species more delicious. They dispatched a destroyer-class vessel, Narthalis, to investigate further. Standard protocol: orbit, observe, sterilize. Narthalis approached the third planet, Earth, according to its own electromagnetic noise, and launched preliminary scans. Something was wrong. The planet was ringed in satellites, most of them ancient, decaying, low-tech. Some hadn't moved in decades. The surface heat signatures were erratic. Civilization, yes, but not at galactic levels. No gravity manipulation, no interstellar drive signatures, no orbital shipyards. Yet, the planet pulsed with energy. Nuclear grids, AI activity, even strange. Bursts of something the database couldn't classify. Then came the second anomaly. A single warship detached from behind the moon, black as void and utterly silent. It bore no transponder, no signature, no known classification. The hull was strange flat, jagged in ways that didn't obey the Vraunak's sense of geometry. It didn't bristle with visible weapons. It didn't launch interceptors. It simply watched. The commander of the Narthalis laughed in 5 throats and issued a threat: disarm or be destroyed. The warship replied with a single phrase in perfect Vraunak: do not. What followed wasn't a battle. It was an absence. One moment, the Vraunak destroyer was engaging scan protocols. The next, it ceased to exist. No explosion. No energy surge. Just gone. The recording ended with a timestamp that didn't match reality. One version said the destroyer was destroyed before it had even fired its first scan. Another said it died after it returned to command, even though it never did. The time signatures contradicted themselves. The logs were corrupted. Multiple timelines tangled like torn cloth. The Vraunak High Council grew intrigued. Not afraid, never that. They were the apex predator, the final answer to the galaxy's long equation of war. But interest was piqued. They dispatched a fleet, not a full assault, just a gesture of dominance. 6 warships, 3 carriers, 2 dreadnoughts. Enough to cow any emergent civilization. Standard doctrine. En route, the fleet received another transmission from Sol. It was audio only, human voice. Calm, female. You keep sending pieces, we're waiting for you. The fleet commander sneered and ordered a wide-band galactic broadcast mocking the humans. The galaxy watched. Many species hidden, fearful, tuned in out of morbid curiosity. Earth's response when it came was not anger, it was laughter. Not cruel, not mocking dash, simply human. Then the warship moved. It came to the edge of the Sol system. Still alone, still silent. It hovered like a shadow just past Neptune's orbit. It had no escort, no visible defenses. And yet, no one approached. Analysis continued. The ship lacked FTL signatures, no wormhole imprint, no warp drive. It shouldn't be there, and yet it was. Speculation rippled through the Vronak fleet. Some claimed the ship was unmanned, a bluff. Others believed it was bait. A few, the ones with more battle scars than honors, suggested something far darker, that this warship wasn't a ship at all. The fleet advanced anyway. In the galactic archives, Earth had only a single note: species type, carbon-based. Developmental. Phase, hostile isolation. Status, unclassified anomaly. The Vronak had faced anomalies before. They devoured every last one, but what they didn't understand, what no data file could ever truly explain, was that humans had never believed in fair fights. Every war they'd fought, they did so outnumbered, outgunned, outspent, and they still won. Because humans didn't just build weapons, they became them. They didn't just fight wars. They evolved through them. And now, as the first of the Vronak carriers drew into range, scanning the lone human ship for weaknesses, someone on the bridge said the words that chilled even their own blood. Why does it look like it's smiling? And across the Sol system, deep beneath the crust of Earth, something ancient and machine-bound woke up, not with malice, with hunger. Asterisk, the Vronak Ascendancy fleet, designated Ember Lance, advanced with the slow, cold precision of an avalanche. 6 capital ships, each a world killer. 3 carriers birthing swarms of drones and atmosphere eaters. 2 dreadnoughts, blacker than space, their hulls lined with neural crystal that screamed in a chorus of simulated death. They drifted into the outer edge of the Sol system like kings arriving at a primitive village. Their scans painted Earth and its surroundings in deep, violating detail. Language banks flooded with intercepted transmissions. Radio static, music, prayers, laughter. What strange species sang before annihilation? But one signal kept repeating, "Come and see." At first, it was dismissed as a cultural taunt, a last delusional gesture of defiance. But then the signal began to change. It evolved. Each repetition altered subtly. Patterns emerged. Hidden data. Strings inside carrier waves, encrypted using methods that defied galactic logic trees. It wasn't human code. It was code written by something that had studied them. The Vronak fleet's internal AI archivist, an adaptive construct, designed to learn from every enemy malfunction after just 3 cycles of exposure to the human signal. It began to mimic laughter before melting down its own processing core. Still, the fleet pressed forward. Fear was not a word the Vronak allowed. The lone Terran ship remained motionless, distant, as if bored. T.N.'s vengeance. A ship with no formal registry, no nation of origin. Just a name and the shape. That damned shape. Why doesn't it reflect light properly? One of the carrier's data officers asked aloud. Not out of fear, no, that wasn't allowed, but from a place of deep confusion. The ship's silhouette bent light like it was moving through time, not just space. LiDAR bounced off it in strange echoes. Some scans showed the ship was 300 meters long. Others said 5 kilometers. One disturbing frame, taken from a recon drone, showed it as a skeletal shape wrapping around the sun like a serpent. They dismissed the frame as corrupted. But no one spoke for several moments afterward. Things began to go missing. First, it was a recon drone model SL-77, cloaked, self-replicating, launched toward Earth to map its magnetic field. It vanished after 4 minutes, but its final transmission showed the Terran ship shifting orientation in impossible ways, like it knew exactly where the drone was, even cloaked. Then a supply skiff disappeared from the hangar of Vranak carrier Tselith. The internal cameras showed it simply wasn't there anymore. No alert, no hull breach, no spatial anomaly. It was there in one frame, gone in the next. When engineers examined the footage, they found a glitch embedded in the timecode frames, repeating forward and backward. They ran a checksum. The checksum came back as a message. Not Vranak, not machine code. A sentence written in perfect English. Do you see us yet? That was when someone in the fleet asked, for the first time in generations, a forbidden question. Is this ... sorcery? It was an old word, archaic, banned in Vranak military doctrine, buried during the era of Enlightenment purges. They were a race of reason, of domination through understanding. But something about this system, about these humans, kept slipping through reason's fingers. Their psychology analysts reviewed intercepted Terran culture. Their wars, their myths, their stories. One file stood out. It was not a military broadcast, not a formal declaration. It was a movie, an ancient human relic, thousands of cycles old by Vranak measure. The scene depicted a lone man, covered in mud, facing a creature from the stars. The man was smaller, slower, weaker, but he survived. He adapted. He won. The scene closed with the man screaming into the jungle. Night. The Vranak interpreter tilted his crest in confusion. Why, he asked, do humans make art glorifying fear? The senior officer replied without turning his gaze from the screen. Because they've never known peace. Then, from Earth, came a new signal. Short, harsh, emotionally sharp. It was a heartbeat. One single amplified thump, human, organic, unmistakable. Followed by another. Then two, then dozens, a rising drumbeat of hearts. Terran hearts, sensed, pounding like war drums. Suddenly, carrier drones lost synchronization. AI subroutines began to loop. Targeting systems fell out of phase. And in every Vranak ship, low, across the neural band communication net, something began to echo. No one could trace the source. Breathing. Human breathing. It wasn't transmitted. It wasn't detectable through conventional means. It was felt, deep inside the bones of every ship's core, pulsing through the dark matter hulls. Even those without ears swore they heard it. That was the moment some began to panic, not openly, but in the quiet ways Vranak showed fear. Slight shifts in body temperature. Too many eye blinks. Silence. Then, without firing a shot, the Vengeance moved again. Not toward the fleet. Through it. No impact. No warning. The ship passed through two Vranak vessels like a shadow through fog. One carrier immediately shut down, its crew unresponsive. Minds lost in catatonic terror. The other ship's internal sensors now showed rooms where there were no doors. Corridors that stretched endlessly. Time dilation zones forming in engineering. Lights flickering in patterns that resembled Morse code. The message was clear. We're being studied. Aboard the Vranak dreadnought Artenax, a final diagnostic of the Terran vessel returned. This time, it bore no encryption. No misdirection. Just a file labeled in Galactic Common Tongue. We were watching long before you saw us. The final line of the report wasn't written by the scanner. It was typed, deliberately, in human script. You should have stayed in the dark. Asterisk. The dreadnought Artenax was silent, not damaged, not incapacitated, just silent. No distress signal, no status update. The other ships could still see it, physically present, outlined against the swirl of Saturn's rings, but no one answered. Hales, its lights were dimmed, its engines idle. Something inside had gone wrong. Captain Krezithal of the carrier Tselith broke silence first. Board them, he ordered. Find out what the humans did. 4 boarding shuttles launched toward the dreadnought, armed with plasma lances. Nano-razors and the most disciplined shock troopers in the Vranak Ascendancy. These were warriors bred in orbital null-gravity crucibles, their minds wired to suppress fear responses entirely. They had sterilized 100 worlds. None of them made it to the hull. All 4 shuttles turned around mid-flight, no command. No malfunction. As if each pilot, simultaneously, had changed their mind. Transcripts later showed that no such thoughts had occurred. The decision wasn't theirs. One pilot, before severing connection with the fleet network, left a single trembling voice log. They're inside the Ordinax. But they're not moving. They're watching us through the hull. I can feel it. I don't know how, I don't even have eyes on them, but I feel them looking at me. Then he began crying. In Vranak culture, crying is a behavior purged at the neural level in childhood. It should have been impossible. He wept for 11 minutes before turning his shuttle into Saturn's core. In the command chamber of the lead dreadnought Scarthish, Admiral Noctal slammed his claws into command chamber of the Klzidud's core. The steel command ring, sending a vibration through the ship's neural relay. The fleet AI returned a cold. Final report. Subject: Human Warship TNS Vengeance. Classification: Unknown hull. Non-reflective obsidian composite. Material structure: quantum reactive armaments. Not found energy source. Untraceable movement signature. Violates known laws of inertia. FTL drive. Not detectable crew complement. Unreadable threat level. Uncalculated suggested action. DISNG. That last recommendation triggered alarms. Vranak A were forbidden from issuing retreat orders. The construct was immediately decommissioned, its mind erased. But the damage was done. Whispers began among the bridge crews. Humans, until now, had been treated as a low-tier anomaly. Their early signal pollution chaotic, analog, fragmented had convinced galactic observers they were immature, warlike, unsophisticated. The Vranak loved such targets: predictable, violent, easy to provoke, easier to conquer. But none of their models had predicted this. What the fleet did not yet know, what the galaxy itself had not realized, was that humanity had not merely developed technology. They had rediscovered something older than science. They had found remnants of an ancient force buried under myth and superstition, something they called black mathematics, an impossible language that rewrote not just matter, but cause and effect. It wasn't magic. It was logic too advanced for current galactic computation. Human physicists had stopped trying to explain how their newest drive systems worked. They only knew it did. At least one ship had returned from a timeline where Earth never formed. Another returned from next week with battle. Damage from a war that hadn't started yet. The TNS Vengeance was not a weapon of war. It was a statement, a warning from a species that had, for generations, learned not only how to survive death, but how to wield it. Back aboard the Scarthish, the Admiral was interrupted by a new signal. No transmission code. No known language. Just raw data. Binary, embedded in gravitational pulses. When decoded, it rendered a 3D model of a solar system. Not Sol. A different one far beyond Vranak space. Inside that system were ruins. Cities, stations, and bones. Giant bones. The ruins were Vranak, thousands of years old. But this was impossible. The Vranak had no history of engaging humans before now. They'd only just discovered them. The final message attached to the data stream was short and chilling. You've already lost this war once. Panic spread, not wild or chaotic, but systematic. Officers failed to maintain telepathic cohesion. Lower deck crew began turning off their implants. Some initiated memory purges, hoping to erase what they had seen. But it was too late. The moment the Vranak connected with the human signal, they had already been read. Their fleet patterns, ship designs, neural frequencies all scanned, catalogued, and mirrored back at them with terrifying intimacy. They hadn't found Earth. Earth had let them find it. Then, for the first time since the fleet entered the system, the Vengeance changed form. Its obsidian hull peeled back, revealing an internal structure that was not mechanical. It looked like a cathedral, angular and vast, with internal geometry that didn't make sense. Lights pulsed from within, like a heart not mechanical, but living. Eyes no, lenses opened across the hull, gazing out into space, seeing not just the ships around it, but their captains, their thoughts. And then the human warship spoke. It didn't use radio, or laser, or subspace. It just spoke, audibly, across the void. We gave you a choice. You chose fire. Every Vranak ship registered a spike in internal temperature. Hulls began to glow from within. Artificial gravity fields trembled. Time distortion readings spiked. Then all star charts in the fleet's archives updated simultaneously. Sol, now classified as a restricted zone. Not by the VRA, and AK. By the Galactic Accord. But the Accord hadn't existed in over 6,000 cycles. Admiral Noctal stood motionless, watching the cathedral ship slowly turn to face him. And for the first time in Vranak history, a military command was issued in a whisper. Run. The fleet scattered. No formation, no strategy, just instinctual flight. The kind buried deep in genetic code from an era when the Vranak still fled predators in the oceans of their cradle world. Dozens of ships twisted space itself in desperation, tearing gravity seams as they breached into FTL, leaving behind shockwaves and burnt exhaust. But not all made it. The TNS Vengeance didn't pursue them. It didn't need to. It predicted them. 2 vessels, a destroyer and a carrier, vanished mid-jump. Not destroyed, not intercepted, just gone. Their trails ended before they began. Probes launched to trace their trajectory returned corrupted bleeding static into Vranak data cores, infecting logic stacks like a virus made of doubt. One Vranak strategist, Commander Zultel, thought to probe the pattern. He triangulated the disappearances, tried to establish a radius of effect. He worked in a sealed chamber, disconnected from the neural grid, alone with ancient manual tools to avoid influence. He never emerged. Instead, a single image was found carved into the wall, a spiral with a red dot at its center. Sol, all around it, in alien languages long dead, the same word repeated in spiraling layers. Observed. Meanwhile, aboard the Vengeance, nothing stirred. No counterattack. No pursuit. Just presence. It hovered, silent, an unblinking eye above Earth. But the effect of its existence rippled far beyond the system. Across the Vranak fleet, strange anomalies began to appear. Weapons systems recalibrated themselves in impossible increments. Plasma coils refused to cycle. Ammunition spoiled before being loaded. One battleship reported its antimatter stores had aged 1.6 million years, in 5 seconds harmless now. Inert dust. They hadn't just stumbled into a trap. They had stumbled into a designed reality. The humans weren't just resisting the Vranak. They were rewriting the rules. But the Vranak, in their arrogance, still believed in tactical supremacy. Their high command hundreds of light years away watched the unraveling in horror, then fury. Pride and tradition overrode caution. Protocol Theta 5 was activated. The Incision-class warform, Draconer, was dispatched. The Draconer was no ordinary ship. It was a sentient weapon, a living hive mind forged from a neutron star's core and bonded with the minds of condemned generals, bound in quantum agony to fuel its hate. It was not designed to win wars. It was designed to end civilizations. The moment the Draconer arrived at the edge of Sol, space twisted. Suns flared, moons cracked. Its presence bled into every orbit. Its form resembled a fractal tornado, layers upon layers of weaponized will, screaming across wavelengths that made the few listening humans bleed from the ears. Finally, a fair fight. Or so the Vranak thought. The Draconer launched its first attack, a lattice of annihilation beams, designed to fold reality around the Vengeance and crush it like paper. The beams never hit. They stopped in place, frozen mid-strike, suspended. In the vacuum, the energy strands shimmered, then reversed. Time reversed. The beams zipped backward, re-entering the Draconer's own weapon cores, and exploded, not with fire, not with light, but with memory. The ship screamed not in sound, but through the minds of every living Vranakin system. It remembered things it had never known: Terran cities burning under nuclear fire, the agony of humanity's first genocide, the screams of the Earthborn watching the stars grow cold. It saw what humans had endured, and what they had become, and it broke. The Draconer's entire AI construct collapsed inward, imploding in a cascade of suicidal thought. Its hull drifted, curling into itself like a dying animal. Then it vanished, not destroyed, but forgotten, as if it had never been. Back on Earth, the signal changed. Where once there had been silence, there was now music, not code, not threat. Child's lullaby. A human nursery tune, barely audible beneath the background noise of space. The Vranak officers who heard it froze. The translator offered a loose interpretation. Sleep now. Little fire, the dark has teeth but won't bite you tonight. For the Watchers are watching, and the war is behind you. For now. The message was simple. The humans weren't attacking because they didn't need to. They were already winning. That was when Vranak High Command made a decision not taken in over 1,000 years. A full retreat order. Not tactical, existential. They issued a recall of all vessels even remotely near the Soul Exclusion Zone. Simultaneously, they reclassified humanity as an apex threat species, only the second such designation in recorded history. And yet, they still believed they had time. They believed humanity, for all its horror, was isolated, contained. But then came the second signal, not from Soul, from within. Vranak Territory. 30-7 systems lit up at once. Ghost signals, human signals. Deep sleeper drones that had been there all along. Quiet observers hidden on backwater moons. Aboard hijacked freighters, buried in meteor fields. The humans had known about the Vranak for decades, and they had been waiting. High Command barely had time to issue a full network lockdown before the final message arrived. Not a threat. Not even a boast. Just one sentence. In perfect Vranak. You are playing checkers on a chessboard made of your own bones. Panic bloomed. Generals screamed. Worlds began evacuation. Still, many in the fleet clung to one final hope. If they could just understand this vengeance, if they could capture or replicate it, they could fight back. But there was something they still didn't understand. The vengeance wasn't the ultimate weapon. It was just the first piece. The Soul System fell silent again. But it wasn't peace. It was the eerie quiet of a battlefield after a slaughter, the kind that makes even machines hesitate to step forward. The Vranak fleet had pulled back, smart enough now to fear, but still too proud to surrender. Somewhere in their command networks, there lingered a belief. This was a localized phenomenon. A freak singularity of human capability. Perhaps Earth had awakened some forbidden technology. Perhaps the vengeance was unique. If they could just isolate the variable, they could still win. So they sent spies. Not ships this time, algorithms. Whispered ghosts in neutrino packets, embedded in stolen pulses, threading themselves through human satellites in the outer solar belt. For 3 hours nothing responded. Then the humans replied. Not with a purge or a firewall, with a door. The Vranak infiltrators were invited into a system labeled Axiom Obsidian. There, they found data, but it wasn't what they expected. It wasn't a tactical archive, or ship schematics, or a list of weapons. It was a map. Not of space. Of death. From ancient history to present day. It detailed every extinction event in human memory. Ice ages, global plagues, wars, collapses, rebellions, famine, genocide, near-planetary sterilization, species eradication, and in the margin of each entry, a human phrase translated by the AI. We survived this. It was not a database dot, it was a warning label dot. By the time the Vranak AI attempted to retreat, it was already infected. Not with malware, but with perspective. The infiltrator net collapsed under paradoxical thought patterns, suicide loops, recursions that mimicked human grief, then layered it with vengeance and hope and fury in ways that Vranak cognition was never built to endure. The result? The Vranak's most secure data clusters began dreaming dot, and the dreams screamed dot back in physical space. Something worse occurred. The retreating Vranak carriers, those that had slipped past the Vengeance's observational field, suddenly stopped reporting status. Not destroyed. Not jammed. Absorbed. From deep within Vranak territory came the first new signal, short, efficient, and unmistakably not human. Its origins shocked their admirals to silence. The source was Velkara, an ancient, sealed Dyson habitat orbiting a neutron star. Abandoned since the Pale Rebellion. It had been quiet for 10,000 years. Until now, on their instruments, the Vranak observed as something woke up inside the Dyson sphere. Faint at first, like a heartbeat returning after long absence, then surging into full power. Readings exceeded all known civilization outputs. Energy signatures were human, but not Earthborn. The transmission arrived. A message from the orphaned. Confusion spread. The orphaned? High Command scrambled through archives. Old contact reports, corrupted pre-human data, lost threads from the time cataclysm. Then the translation fragment came through, ripped from ancient galactic myth. The orphaned are those left behind. The broken sons and daughters of dead stars. Survivors who made fire from the bones of fallen gods. The orphaned were a myth. A ghost civilization whispered about in pre-FTL cycles. It was said they had tried to fight something older than time, and failed. Humanity, it seemed, had found them, and worse, recruited them. The orphan spoke again. You are fighting the wrong species. Earth does not make conquerors. It makes revenants. You awakened them. We armed them. And the screen changed. 1,000 new signals lit up across the galaxy, not from Sol, not even from known human colonies. These were different. Hidden nodes, ancient satellites. Stolen Vranak tech, repurposed and buried inside neutron mines. Black hole observatories, and junk worlds long since dismissed as lifeless. Each one powered up. Each one broadcast the same phrase. Protocol. Hellseed to the Vranak. It was meaningless. But their computers translated it using borrowed Terran code. The rough interpretation? Let the fire spread. The first detonation occurred in the Juxtar Drift, an abandoned mining cluster where dozens of Vranak ships were staged for resupply. There was no explosion. No flash. Just silence. Everything vanished. Later examination would show that every molecule in a 12U radius had been inverted, not disintegrated, but phased into an adjacent quantum mirror. Gone from this reality, the second detonation was worse. A memory weapon. Deployed on the Vranak world of Theraxis Prime. It didn't destroy buildings or bodies. It deleted history. Entire generations woke up unable to remember their culture, their wars, their lineage. A whole civilization reduced to amnesiacs staring at their hands, unable to recall what they were, or why they had ever wanted to kill. The Vranak war machine collapsed. Not from a lack of ships, but from the collapse of identity. Back aboard the Scarthish, Admiral Noctal stood in what had once been the strategic war center. His officers, those that remained, were silent. Not from discipline. From fear. He watched the data scroll in. Earth remained silent. The Vengeance had not moved. But all across the stars, the damage spread like fire through dry leaves. Worlds flipped allegiance. Some surrendered to Earth before a single human soldier landed. and on dozens of moons. The symbol appeared, a burning hand holding a spiral, the orphan's mark. The Vranak's worst realization came not from the destruction, but from a fact they had never considered. This wasn't a war. It was a response, and they had pulled the trigger. Too late. Noctal finally understood. The humans weren't trying to win. They were trying to teach, *, 1,000 light years from Sol. On the edge of what was once Vranak-controlled space, the sky tore open, not figuratively, not metaphorically. Physically tore. A rift appeared across the vacuum, stitched from gravitational shears and Tockin spikes, crackling with blue-white lightning that licked across the hulls of nearby ships like static on dry skin. Then came the rumble, not of sound, but of space itself groaning under pressure. From the tear emerged something. Not the vengeance, something larger, something older. The ship that emerged had no name. It didn't need one. It was built before Earth had nations, before humans had cities. It had slumbered beneath the Antarctic ice, a relic of the forgotten war that had erased the orphan from the stars. The humans had reawakened it, repaired it, upgraded it. And now they called it only the RCHON. It dwarfed the Vranak fleet, not in size but in presence. Observing it through sensors caused nausea, even for Vranak not physically near it. Ship's instruments spiraled with contradictory data, massless yet heavy, cold and hot at once, moving faster than light and slower than time. Its hull bore no insignia, just a series of etched human words, simple, ancient, and terrifying. If we are forced to become monsters, then let the stars tremble at our return. It began. The Vranak were ready, or so they told themselves. Dozens of capital ships in defensive phalanx, planet-based turrets primed, stealth mines, viral drones, adaptive shields tuned to mimic solar plasma. They fired first. The Archon didn't dodge. It absorbed. Lasers bent mid-path. Kinetic slugs aged to dust before contact. Drones turned on each other mid-flight. A second later, the Archon responded not with a beam, not with a missile. It simply looked. The closest Vranak ship blood of Galana froze. No explosion, just a silence so complete it defied physics. The crew's consciousness flickered and vanished. Every being on board was gone, not dead. Erased. The ship drifted, empty, a shell. One by one, the remaining ships began to fall, not by fire, but by dread. Crew turned on themselves, unable to process what they faced. Officers wept, their minds unraveling under the pressure of something older than fear, hopelessness. Still, Admiral Noctal tried to rally. He screamed across the comms, demanded resolve, begged the fleet to regroup. His voice cracked with conviction. Until the Archon answered him directly. No translation, no encryption. It spoke in his voice. You taught your children to fear the dark. We taught ours to become it. Then the Archon moved, not fast. Inevitably. It drifted toward the core of the fleet like a god descending through fog. Ships fired in panicked volleys, but their weapons betrayed them, turning back, misfiring, disassembling in mid-air. Then came the second wave, the vengeance, rising behind the Archon like a blade drawn from a scabbard. This time it acted. With surgical precision, it flanked and flensed. Entire command nodes vanished. Officers dissolved into white ash without sound. AI cores rewrote themselves with human code and began broadcasting old Earth radio jazz, war speeches, lullabies. One ship, the Tal Shar, tried to flee. It activated FT vanished and reappeared directly in front of the Archon, spinning. Broken, its jump path reversed. The Archon blinked it out of existence. Still, Noctal fought. He activated the fleet's Omega Protocol, a last-ditch failsafe that summoned the Starshard, a planetary weapon housed in the crust of their throne world, powered by a newborn black hole. It launched. It hit the Archon dead center. Reality blinked. Then Stabilized. And the Archon was still there, unmoved, untouched. A message appeared in every Vranak cockpit, etched in crimson glyphs across the starscape. We buried gods stronger than this. The final act began. The Archon's hull opened, not to reveal weapons, but voices. Human voices, songs of war, cries of loss, shouts of defiance. A living archive of humanity's pain, unleashed as a weapon of remembrance. Every Vranak heard it. Every Vranak felt it. They experienced humanity's worst moments as if they lived them. The March of Ash and the Cryo Wars. The silence after the first singularity collapse. The desperation of Europa's descent. Hiroshima. The dust decades. The day Earth watched its moon break apart and still refused to kneel. No race had suffered more, and none had endured better. By the time the Archon reached the heart of the fleet, resistance was gone. Ships floated, silent, their crews unconscious or weeping. The Archon passed through them. Like a ghost, the vengeance did the rest mercifully clean. Like a scalpel through cancer, the last Vranak world, a once proud citadel of culture and military pride, surrendered. Before the humans arrived, they didn't have to invade. The people lined up outside their domes and looked up. And saw Earth's shadow blotting out their sun. Across the galaxy, the message went out, not from human command, not from a political body. From the orphan. Translated into every known language, broadcast on every frequency. Let it be known, humanity did not begin this war, but they will end it. Not with cruelty, not with malice, but with memory. And fire, always fire. And in the ruins of the final battlefield, carved into obsidian with quiet reverence, stood a single human proverb. We do not fear the dark. We were born in it. The galaxy exhaled. In the silence that followed, countless species tried to comprehend what had happened. The war, which had begun with screams and fire and the thunder of dominion, ended with no treaty, no negotiations, no condition of surrender. It ended like the tide, inevitable, unstoppable, and uncaring. The Vranak Empire was gone, not extinct, but humbled. Its fleet was ash, its command structure shattered. Its once proud people scattered across moons and orbital remnants now. Whisper legends of the Silence War. They no longer call it a conflict. They call it a lesson, and it begins the same, every time in every tongue. We thought them weak. Now the Vranak live behind what they call the line of humility, a demarcation in the stars, beyond which no ship ventures, no probe scans. Not because humans demanded it, but because none dare cross it. Their youngest don't remember the Empire. They remember the screams. They remember the cold voice of the Archon before it vanished back into the rift it came from. They remember the way the vengeance hovered at the edge of every battle, not always attacking, just watching, like a guardian or a warden, on the distant world of Ralanakar, now a neutral enclave rebuilt from the ashes of war. A memorial stands, not to the Vranak, but to the fallen species that never fought back, hundreds of them, crushed under Vranak conquest, before Earth ever took to the stars. Now, etched in stone, in every language known to the galaxy, is a phrase beneath those names. They fell before the fire, then the fire turned, and it remembered. At the base of the monument, an old Vranak philosopher named Nalko sat under a glass canopy, penning what would become the most widely circulated document in galactic history. On humanity, the fifth element, he never fought in the war. He didn't have to, but he watched it burn through his people like truth through a lie. And what he wrote was this: for eons, we believed ourselves supreme. We hunted, enslaved, devoured. We dismissed empathy as weakness, mercy as indulgence, cooperation as naivety. And then came Earth, not as conquerors, not as saviors, but as proof. Proof that the strongest beings in the galaxy were not those who had never suffered, but those who had suffered most, and survived with their souls sharpened, not shattered. He described the humans as paradox incarnate. They cry over lost pets, then invent weapons that can end stars. They cherish peace, but will fight with such ruthless ingenuity that even their enemies must marvel. They sing lullabies as they march into hell. They grieve deeply, but when wronged, they do not stop. Nalco ends his essay with a warning, now studied in military academies across dozens of systems. If you ever meet a human and they offer you peace, take it. If they offer you friendship, honor it. If they offer you forgiveness, cherish it. But if you raise your weapons against them, even once, pray the stars forget your name. And so humanity's legend spread, not through conquest, through reputation. A single warship now patrols the edges of claimed space, the Vengeance, eternal and unchanged, its name still not spoken aloud in Vranak culture, not because it is forbidden, because it is respected. Children are told stories of the ship that spoke silence, of the ghost fleet that hums old Earth ballads, of the humans who sleep under red stars with one eye open, not because they are afraid, but because they remember. Humanity did not build an empire. They didn't need to. They built fear, but deeper still, they built hope. In the cycles following the Silence War, hundreds of oppressed systems quietly overthrew their tyrants. Former enemies of Earth began reforming policies, not to appease humanity, but because something had changed. Something had shifted in the fabric of civilization. Everyone had seen it. For one brief, horrifying, beautiful moment, the galaxy glimpsed what it truly meant to survive. It meant being like Earth, broken, battered, flawed, but still standing, still fighting, still dreaming, still dangerous. On the ruins of old Valkera, the orphan, now allied again with humanity, began broadcasting a message once every rotation. We are not gods. We are not monsters. We are humans. And when we rise, we do not rise alone. The Vranak, now rebuilding as a peaceful enclave, sent an offering to Earth every cycle. Books, music, even DNA samples of extinct creatures, preserved to see if the humans might restore them. They call this ritual the Ember Gift. And though Earth never responds, the Vranak continue, because they know silence doesn't mean absence. It means the fire sleeps, and every species now knows, somewhere hidden among the stars, humanity watches. They wait. They hope they are never needed again. But if the fire is ever lit once more, then the stars will tremble, because this time they won't send a single ship. They'll send the storm.